modern SpongeBob. These two words hold a lot of weight. I have criticized modern SpongeBob quite a lot on this channel, and honestly, I think I've been a little too negative on it. Let's take a look at 5 high-quality modern SpongeBob episodes and ask ourselves if there's still hope for the show. Chapter 1. SpongeBob TrashPants. The thing I like the most about SpongeBob TrashPants is its lesson, which is twofold. SpongeBob is shown to care about the state of litter on the beach and vows to clean it up. But because he is so obsessed with getting every single piece of litter, he ends up causing problems. This teaches the lesson that while it's good to care about the state of the world around you, you shouldn't go too far and try to take control of everything. In a lot of ways, this episode is nothing more than an excuse to do a bunch of different slapstick bits, much like Laundro-Madness, another season 16 episode which I complained about in a previous video. However, where this episode succeeds and Laundro-Madness fails is that SpongeBob TrashPants gives SpongeBob a specific perspective that motivates everything that he does. So when there are silly moments like SpongeBob sucking up all the sand on the beach, getting pulled around by Bubble Bass, and this Looney Tunes-esque bit with the hole breaking the laws of physics and getting smacked around like an air hockey puck, these humorous moments resonate more with the audience because we were made to be more invested in SpongeBob reaching his goal. But Nosferatu is in this episode.
This is the only flaw.
Another great element of this episode is its villain, Plankton. This is a great non-formula Plankton villain motivation where he tries to get back at SpongeBob, who poked him in the butt earlier, by flying around a fake piece of trash that drives SpongeBob crazy. What I like about the conflict between SpongeBob and Plankton is that it was brought about by SpongeBob himself, since SpongeBob's obsession with needing to clean the beach is what brought on Plankton's ire in the first place. Overall, SpongeBob TrashPants is an absolute masterpiece of a SpongeBob episode. The art direction, the story, the humor, it's really the best example of what the show is still capable of all these years later. Chapter 2. Krusty Kafateria. Krusty Kafateria revolves around SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs working at the high school cafeteria, only to be forced to make bland cafeteria food instead of Krabby Patties because of the authoritarian lunch lady. The episode succeeds at using this conflict to tell a story about the importance of self-expression, with Krabby Patties representing said self-expression. It also, in a more literal sense, addresses something relatable about bland, mass-produced food. The main arc of the episode revolves around the lunch lady learning to embrace the Krabby Patty after spending so much of the episode fighting against it. While the story itself is pretty solid, the episode is definitely a little less memorable than SpongeBob TrashPants. It's got some good pieces of humor here and there, but its pacing is a bit meandery, and I think some of the slower parts of establishing the conflict as well as some of the action sequences are kind of there to pad the time. The whole episode is just trying to say people who hate self-expression should try it sometimes, and that is communicated pretty concisely by showing the lunch lady being mean and then having her eat the Krabby Patty and change her perspective. The episode either should have been shorter or had some kind of subplot that could have given us a little more to work with. It should have leaned a lot more into the Krabs-Pearl relationship, since Pearl was the reason Krabs was even there in the first place. Even with that in mind, I do still like this episode and would consider it an example of modern SpongeBob succeeding at telling a story. Chapter 3. Pardon My Wand. Pardon My Wand starts off strong with an immediate conflict. Sandy is skeptical of a magician because she is a scientific thinker. Already, I like that this episode has something to actually say. The magician that Sandy was skeptical of turns out to actually be magic, and SpongeBob accidentally gets the magician's wand stuck inside his body, which causes him to involuntarily magicify a bunch of stuff. A lot of the magical things SpongeBob does are really creative and really do sell that this is a dangerous power that SpongeBob is stuck with. Also, I do want to point out that SpongeBob does turn a few things into regular, not underwater bunnies. At first, I was gonna criticize this episode for that, like I did for Gorilla Suit Day having underwater gorillas that break the world building, but no, I'm gonna give this episode a pass because, I mean, it's magic. At the end of the episode, Sandy fights the magician guy in kind of a science versus magic sort of fight. When Sandy uses a science fair-esque balloon technique to free the wand and solve the conflict, it inspires the magician to give up magic and pursue science. This conclusion turned this from a good episode to a great episode. A twist character arc. I really didn't see it coming at all. With the way the beginning was set up, with Sandy not being able to scientifically explain the magician's tricks, I thought the main arc was going to be about scientific Sandy having to learn that there are some things that we just have no explanations for, which is probably something that a lot of scientists have to come to terms with when it comes to mysteries of the universe that are left unexplained. And it's also a good lesson for most people, as the need for having to know an explanation to everything when sometimes there is no way to access it is unhealthy. Narrative not only teaches us that lesson through Sandy, but it teaches that lesson while still valuing science by having this magician character profess a newfound love for science itself. Through the respective lessons learned by Sandy and the magician, the audience learns that it's important to not get too worked up when something is unexplainable, but also that it is important to value curiosity and scientific explanation. It strikes a perfect balance between those two things, and doesn't go too far into either extreme. A surprisingly deep lesson in a modern SpongeBob episode. Chapter 4, Stupor-Stition. At first, I thought that Stupor-Stition was going to be a Mr. Krabs Navy flashback episode because it opens with a young Krabs in the Navy. While I was a bit disappointed we didn't get a lore episode like that, I was pleased with the episode we got, which was about Mr. Krabs being particularly paranoid on Friday the 13th, due to a traumatic experience with bad luck-related things in his Navy days. Krabs is a good character to use for a story like this, because Krabs is a character who usually has a lot of power and control over situations, with him being SpongeBob and Squidward's boss and all. So when an episode takes away Mr. Krabs' control, it's interesting to see how he deals with it. The episode has about the lesson you would expect. Don't get so worked up about things that are considered bad luck, because it can impede on your life to be so paranoid. I do also like the part of the episode where they do typical good luck related rituals to try and counteract the bad luck. While one way to ignore bad luck related paranoia is to just ignore it, sometimes people can feel comfort in something like knocking on wood. And since the issue is rooted in your own psyche anyway, if it works, it works. Oh yeah, there's also a leprechaun fight, which does work with the story. Look, since it's magical, I'm gonna give it another pass, a slight pass this time, for not being an under-the-sea thing. But would it have been so hard to make the leprechaun like some kind of sea creature? Missed world-building opportunity aside, Stupor-Stition is a solid, funny episode with a good story and lesson. Chapter 5, Pigskin Pearl. Pigskin Pearl is a little different from the previous episodes I've talked about because it is a double-length special. The episode succeeds at portraying a meaningful character arc involving Pearl, who is encouraged to join her school football team because she's a whale, which conflicts with her passion as a cheerleader. The episode makes a lot of good and creative choices in order to tell its story. I think it struck a really good writing balance in showing us how Pearl doesn't exactly fit in as a football player without making her the butt of the joke or leaning into tired tropes, and still succeeds at telling a pretty enjoyable and funny narrative. A lot of the mistakes she makes involve getting the coach hurt. This coach gets hurt a lot throughout this episode, to the point where he's just ahead at the end, but honestly, I don't feel like this coach getting hurt was too mean-spirited. Modern SpongeBob is, at times, a lot better when it comes to showing characters getting hurt. Like, this guy really gets beaten up throughout the episode, but the way they portray it doesn't really bother me too much. Probably because the way he gets hurt is so cartoonish and not house fancy toenail scene. The coach getting hurt also makes us endear him more as a character, because even though it's Pearl who gets him hurt most of the time, he never really gets mad at her about it. It makes him pretty likable. Since it's a 22-minute episode, there's a handful of subplots that get a good amount of time to breathe. SpongeBob takes Pearl's place as a cheerleader and plays a pivotal role in motivating Pearl at the end of the episode. Mr. Krabs wants to use SpongeBob's cheerleading to sell Krabby Patties and ends up losing a bet to a dad from the rival school. The Krabs subplot, I think, is also handled well, because even though Krabs is trying to profit off of Pearl's school activities, it's not portrayed cynically, like he's only there to profit. Like, he's genuinely supportive, but he's still Mr. Krabs. And because he's making bets and trying to sell burgers, it gives him something to do within the narrative. And then there's a Patrick subplot where he takes over the announcer booth because he mistakes it for a bathroom. I really thought I wasn't going to like that part, but honestly, it really grew on me. And Patrick being the announcer just helped the world feel a little more full and lived in. There was one part of the episode where they did a my leg joke, and I just couldn't stand it. No pun intended. I think this might be the most annoying my leg joke I've ever seen in this show. So it's during the cheerleader tryouts, and there's like a girl version of Fred that's his daughter, and you're just like, yeah, you break the leg. And the moment when I saw her, I was like, hold on. I'm sure they're going to try to subvert this, right? Like, clearly we're all thinking she's going to break her leg, so they're going to do some kind of switcheroo. But no, she literally just does a thing and she breaks her leg. And that's it. And then Fred goes down, he breaks his leg, and then there's a Dr. Fred, and then, oh my goodness. Enough with the legs, guys. Enough with the legs.
This is the only flaw.
The episode also does a good job of establishing the stakes of the final team they go up against. It's the typical football episode antagonist, the team from a faraway school who's really tough. We've seen it a million times, but really, if you can set aside that it's a bit of a tired trope, I think they did a good job creatively portraying this rival team as a group that is worth being afraid of. All the interesting animation choices they made sold me on the stakes and got me invested in the final minutes of the episode. I also like that they played around with the large size of the rival team because, Pearl is usually like the largest character around, so to have the rival team also be really giant kind of plays into that. And then it ends with this big triumphant moment where Pearl scores a touchdown only to find out that the other team already scored so much they lost anyway. But she gets to feel good about herself knowing she could even score against the other team, which is something that no other player could actually do. And then at the end, she decides to go back to cheerleading because they realized SpongeBob wasn't a student, so she took his place. All in all, the episode is a really great portrayal of a young person getting an opportunity to try something new, finding it doesn't suit them, and then going back to doing what they enjoyed doing before, which is a really solid and relatable story and lesson, especially for the target audience of this show. Chapter 6. Different or worse? So, as I was watching these good modern SpongeBob episodes, there was this little voice that was nagging me the whole time, and it kept saying, "These are all right, but if you compare it to the first 3 seasons," and I was like, stop it, I'm trying to be objective here. But that voice did encourage me to ask an important question. Are these episodes different or worse? I know for sure they are not the same. None of these episodes are anything like what we saw in the first 3 seasons. The story structure, the tone, SpongeBob's voice, it's all completely different. But is it worse? It's hard to say. I can look at the bad episodes of this season and be like, yeah, of course this is worse than the original. One is bad and one is good. But what if they're both good? One has to be more good, right? Well, not exactly. Sometimes things are just different and both good. And it doesn't really matter if one is better or worse. At least if I'm talking about the 2 best episodes I talked about in this video, which were SpongeBob TrashPants and Pardon My Wand, while these are very different from the first 3 seasons, I hesitate to say if either are better or worse. They're just both good, yet different. The show is approached differently now, and just because there are things that I prefer about the pacing and stories of the original couple of seasons, perhaps because I'm biased because I watched them in childhood, doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of good to be found in how these new episodes are written. There is one important thing I noticed when analyzing these 5 episodes specifically, and it's that I think it might be possible that SpongeBob as it exists today might be better off with 22-minute episodes rather than 11-minute episodes. Like, my main issue with a lot of these episodes, both the good and the bad ones, is their pacing. They take too long to get into their stories, and as such, they aren't as effective at telling those stories. Now, plenty of episodes use the 11-minute runtime to their advantage, SpongeBob TrashPants and Pardon My Wand specifically. But as I was watching Pigskin Pearl, a double-length episode, I realized that 22-minute episodes might be better for this show. Pigskin Pearl didn't feel like a special. It just felt like a normal episode that happened to be longer. And maybe the show should do more of that. I think a happy medium would be to bump a decent amount of new episodes to 22 minutes without the 22-minute episodes being considered specials, and instead being looked at more so as different kinds of episodes. There's one episode that I would consider flawed from this season, not bad, just flawed, that I think would have benefited from being 22 minutes long, and it was Heart of Garbage, which premiered 1 week after SpongeBob TrashPants. Yeah, 2 garbage-related episodes 1 week apart. weird. Anyway, Heart of Garbage is an episode that I think could have had a really good lesson about being a more respectful person, as Squidward's house is filled with garbage after he treats some garbage men rudely because they interrupted his meditation. Get it? Like he's doing his meditation that's supposed to make him all calm, but then he's yelling at people for interrupting him. However, even though the episode's main arc revolves around Squidward getting back to normal and sets up this whole garbage cult leader concept, most of the episode's runtime is dedicated to SpongeBob and Patrick just kind of navigating through the garbage maze. And like, I get why the episode needed this. It shows how hard the journey that SpongeBob and Patrick are taking through the garbage, but it left no time to explore Squidward's character arc, which was supposed to be the heart of the episode. If the episode was double length, it wouldn't have had to cut anything out and would have been able to have a deeper, more meaningful story. But when a 22-minute episode is considered a special, it's probably a hard sell to the executives to have the Squidward's house gets filled with refuse episode be the one they sign off on getting the special treatment. Chapter 7. Am I too negative? With these 5 episodes I talked about, it's clear that modern SpongeBob is still capable of creating good episodes, and these 5 aren't even the only good episodes of Season 16. I also liked The Haunted Bucket and Go Fetch, but I already talked about those in other videos. Here's a quick rundown of all the Season 16 episodes that have aired so far at the time of filming this video. We've got 7 bad episodes, 4 flawed episodes, and 7 good episodes. So from what we can see here, the bad and the mediocre does outweigh the episodes I would call good, and this would just not be the case if I did the same thing with any of the first 3 seasons. So, in my opinion, modern SpongeBob is still worse than classic SpongeBob overall. But that doesn't mean that some individual episodes in modern SpongeBob aren't of high quality. Something interesting about this chart is that the reference episodes, being Timeline Twist-Up, Squidward's Tough Break, and Curse of the Weredoodle, are all episodes I consider bad, which feeds into my conspiracy theory that the writers intentionally put less work into reference episodes because they know people will watch them just because they're references. It's also odd that all the episodes I consider bad are all before the episodes I consider good, with the flawed episodes a little more scattered. It's almost like they kind of locked in for these last couple of episodes. I wonder why that is. Also, strangest of all, every good episode is paired with another good episode, other than Pigskin Pearl, which isn't paired with any episode at all because it's a double-length special. Is that intentional? Do they go out of their way to pair good episodes with good episodes? Seems strange, right? But there is something I noticed about this chart that I think is much more eye-opening. Almost all of the episodes that I labeled bad are episodes that I felt compelled to make videos on, with the only exception being the Creepy Crab. And the only reason I didn't make a video about the Creepy Crab is because I basically feel exactly the same way about it that I feel about Laundro-Madness. It's just an episode that has no story and a premise that is just an excuse to do a bunch of bits. The only difference being that Creepy Crab has Nosferatu in it. So if you want to know my feelings on Creepy Crab, just watch my Laundro-Madness video and my Nosferatu video, and basically, yeah, that's how I feel about the episode. So anyway, I realized that almost all these bad episodes are the ones I made videos on. Does that say anything about me as a creator? Am I overly negative? Or does that say anything about you, the viewer? Maybe not you specifically watching this. Maybe you like positive videos. I mean, you watched this far into this positive video, but I mean you, as in the audience. The invisible hand that decides which of us are worthy enough to be able to quit our day jobs and do YouTube full time. By the way, don't forget I have a Patreon. After all, these negative videos are by far my most viewed videos, while my more positive videos will often get a bit less attention. Is it possible that this is a leading contributor to why modern SpongeBob is thought of as the worst thing ever? Well, not entirely. I mean, these episodes, the bad ones, they're really awful. Like, seriously, I know I've been nice to the current people behind the show in this video, but these bad episodes are so much more bad than the good episodes are good. The quality of these bad episodes is just completely unacceptable for a show with a reputation like SpongeBob. Basically, if all the modern SpongeBob episodes were at least decent, which is not a big ask for professional writers who are working on one of the biggest cartoons in the world, then I'm sure that modern SpongeBob would not have the reputation it currently does. I also would like to point out the other side of the coin, the importance of being negative. Look, the reality is that these more negative videos get more clicks, and because I understand that, I try to turn that negativity into positivity. Each of my more critical videos go out of their way to either compare themselves to a previous episode or episodes that did better, give ideas for rewrites that would have improved the episode, and most importantly, use SpongeBob as a tool to teach the lesson that is the central thesis of my channel, that stories are a central foundation of our perspectives and beliefs and are far more valuable than just base entertainment. And these subpar modern SpongeBob episodes are a perfect avenue to teach that, not only because they give a great example of what not to look for in our media, but because the negativity surrounding current modern SpongeBob gets a lot of attention. And I'm simply using that negative attention to try and teach a positive message. Look, I do love making positive content. I actually love when I look at a piece of media and say, wow, this is something. It's kind of sad that after I saw Search for SquarePants in the theaters and loved it, the first thing I thought was, oh no, I'm not going to get as many views on YouTube because I only have good things to say about this movie. And I was right about that. My positive review of Search for SquarePants is underperforming relative to my more scathing reviews of bad modern episodes. Should I have just faked outrage at Ice Spice or that one weird billboard so that I could get more clicks, even though I don't care at all about those things? No. I couldn't do that because that would be insincere, and that is something that I, as a creator, will never compromise on. In the past few months, I have grown a whole lot as a creator. I've leaned in a lot on the SpongeBob stuff, even though this is supposed to be a general movies and TV show analysis channel, not just a SpongeBob channel. I've leaned in even more on criticizing modern SpongeBob because I know that's what the audience looks for. I've made my titles and thumbnails much more visceral and intense at times. These actions are all compromises, but they're compromises I've made in service to my audience, and I'm still proud of my content, even with those compromises, because I still have been able to spread a positive message about writing and media literacy through my platform. But if you're still sick of the fact that so much of my content is modern SpongeBob bad, then maybe you can do something about it. Promote this video, hype it, make sure you comment. It's already going to get a smaller audience because it's positive, but maybe we can reverse that. Make this one of my most watched videos and let's show them all that there's still a place for positivity in our critical media. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider supporting my Patreon or becoming a channel member. Also, check out my gaming channel where I just put out a video about Battle for Bikini Bottom GBA. Man, that game is a disaster.